Button's been pressed.
The nuclear switch has been flipped. We are now awaiting the apocalypse. In the words of was it Reagan who was the one that did the
Yeah, the bombing begins 5 minutes from now, I think.
the bombing begins in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was on a hot
Reagan.
mic, which, by the way, we're officially live, so that was on a hot mic. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to...
We're sorry, Russia, but you must be destroyed for the good of the American taxpayer.
Hey there. Yep,
No
I'm
hard
Adam.
feelings. I'm Techpriest. And we also have with us today as a special guest,
Dog.
Greg.
Hi, dog.
Hi, dog.
Yeah, and Greg's dog who took half an hour to finish her walk.
She is a good dog. So we're finally getting back to Chronicles today. It's been a while. We've let it all out, but we're very close to Midsummer's Eve. So we thought we'd get in with Changeling, our Return to Dark Eras. If you have not bought this book yet, I honestly have to say that we have given you how many examples of how good it is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'd say 7 or 8.
The official number is a lot.
Yes, and we're officially at the second half of the book now.
Yes, it's that part. It's that part where White Wolf is even more justified with taking it with shutting us all down.
Yes. This is a fun.
We don't care.
No, they're pretty chill about media like this. They've done cooperative stuff with review podcasts before. In any case, Lily Saber and Thorn is the name of this. The year is 1648 and just after. So this is kind of the height of the Sun King, the height of France's power in Europe.
Yeah, I was about to say, don't make people think for some reason we're in the Inca Empire.
No, that's a Hoimad we've had an idea for how many years now? 3 almost?
Only about a year and a half. Anyway, yeah, Lily Saber and Thorn, I just was showing off the art assets, the official book. Yep, it's right at the end of the 30 Years' War. So, right after a fuckload of people died.
If you want to, there is a setting in, I think, either Dark Eras 2 or The Companion, which is the 30 Years' War for Promethean of all splats. Which I suppose is actually fitting, but we'll get to that when we get to that in 3 years at this rate.
Yep.
But yeah, 30 Years' War is over. France is now without a doubt, the ascendant power in Europe.
Mainly because everyone else murdered each other really bad.
Partly.
France murdered itself quite a bit, but they got it out of the way. They got all that murdering each other out of the way like 50 years ago. All those religious wars.
No, the religious wars were happening at the same time as the 30 Years' War, actually.
They bled together, yeah.
Yeah, but they end. I think they end right at before the 30 Years' War ended.
They ended before the intervention of France into the 30 Years' War.
Yeah,
about 5 years before or so.
But yeah, France is kind of in that. It's in the ascendance, but the problem is this is France. Whenever France almost succeeds at ruling Europe, it fucks up. Not during Louis XIV's time. This is where France is damn near at its peak. But it's going to screw up, and it's going to screw up spectacularly.
Well, the War of the Spanish Succession is coming in at the end of the century.
That's great. That's a good one. That's basically France found a way to win, but still lose.
Yes. It's quite impressive.
It is, because if you look at history, France comes close to becoming the main power of Europe so often. It's hilarious.
Yeah. It is.
But yeah, if you're
kind
wondering,
of amazing.
The Sun King, compared to how a French peasant's life is, it's kind of that super rich versus super poor element. They kind of go into details about that. Now, it being the Age of Reason, not quite.
It's Bezos versus your average Amazon warehouse worker.
Yep. And while this book tries to proclaim it's the Age of Reason, that's actually not quite true. The Age of Enlightenment just barely starts around here.
it really gets its start, I'd say, in the 1680s or so, when we finally get a lot of the printing press is extremely widespread. We're seeing a lot more communication between intellectuals in Europe, and we're also seeing a lot more universities actually acting as universities should. In terms of they're becoming less religious institutions and more secular ones.
Effectively, at this point, the scientific method is brand new, I believe.
It is very new.
I think it came right in the 1640s, if I remember right. But this is before the English Bill of Rights, which inspires a lot of political thought. Yes, the Magna Carta kind of does that to a degree, but
not really,
it's when William of Orange crosses the channel and
which won't be until the end of the century, actually.
Wait, this is 1648. This is right before Charles I gets his head chopped off.
Yes, it is. This is right in the full swing of the English Civil War.
Yeah. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Alexandre Dumas' main writing period time.
And also the setting for a lot of classic literature.
Count of Monte Cristo, Three Musketeers, obviously.
The main thing about this is that while the setting that we're talking about is that this is a time when France is on the ascendant, but also this is the time of the witch hysterias. This is the time of all of the kind of recovery period from the 30 Years' War, where everyone's like, well, what the fuck do we do now?
Well, it's very simple. We drink.
You're not wrong. There's the start of more of an education of the lower classes, and bureaucracy is beginning to spread, because to manage a state like France centrally, you need a lot more clerks. You need a lot of them, and lawyers. A lot of lawyers.
And priests.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, actually, it was the efforts of priests that did a lot of that groundwork.
Yes, it was.
Particularly one interesting fella, Cardinal Richelieu.
Yeah, this is the age of Richelieu, possibly the most influential churchman in European history.
To the point where he's been vilified, named for French battleships.
Battleships, carriers. He's a national icon of France in many ways.
To the point where, honestly, if I had to name historical figures, he'd probably be in my top 3.
In terms of influence
and influential.
And, the man was such a spy master. One of his official portraits included drawings of his robes with eyes on them. Cleverly hidden, but they were there.
It's actually because he was a changeling in real life.
Why not? Fuck it. You can do that if you want to in this game.
His clothing actually did have eyeballs.
Why not?
He got it from the goblin market.
You're small brain. You're not thinking big brain enough. His clothing was a changeling. He was human.
Oh.
His clothing's a changeling.
Oh no.
No. In reality, Cardinal Richelieu is actually 3 goblins in a trench coat that has eyes on them.
I support this theory. This theory makes total and complete sense.
So why Swashbucklers? Well, we just kind of went to a more interesting, serious setting. This is more of the fun, goofy setting.
Yeah, Fallen Blossoms is a very serious look at, like, Japanese folklore and all this, like, other hunter stuff, and the gritty and serious nature of, like, the Edo streets. This is
you've seen the Three Musketeers.
You've seen the Three Musketeers, right?
Cristo. You've seen
Robin Hood.
Robin Hood,
like the classic Robin Hood movies.
You've seen this is also around the age of pirates, the golden age of pirates.
Yes, it is. It is directly dead smack in the middle of the golden age of piracy.
So why not just channel your inner Errol Flynn and just play this guy, this jolly horned rogue rapscallion, swinging from the masts as he violently plunders and murders people for their money.
Yes. In fact, it is a good point that Louis XIV is kind of a bit of a controversial figure in some circles, because of there's no doubt that his efforts to centralize France did pay off in the long run. He's also personally kind of a bit of a dirtbag. As any
historical ruler being an asshole. Wow.
Louis
well,
the
there's
nickel in the time
is
box.
the responsible for the age of absolutism.
Yes, he is.
And also
He's
is
also
responsible for the end of the French monarchy, in a way.
Yes. He basically ties the monarchy so tightly to that of the state, and to do so, and also the idea of the monarchy having to spend vast amounts of money to keep the petty nobility happy by
Louis
distracting
XIV
them.
was known for his insane pageants and balls.
Yes, he was very famous for them, to the point where King James and King Charles of Scotland and England both kind of imitated him in this.
Which is why Parliament would eventually chop the head off of one of them.
Yes.
Well, that and he kept delaying because he was so in eyeballs of debt.
Yes, he was, and he was trying to raise money without going to Parliament to ask for taxes, because Parliament would have said, "Okay, we'll raise taxes, but you have to cut your spending."
Imsa, you say like ending a monarchy is a bad thing. I don't know. The first French Republic was kind of a refutation of that.
Was a bit nuts. Then
the English Commonwealth also wasn't exactly great.
It wasn't. These are kind of early runs at making a republic, and they didn't go too well. Which is funny because there's a republic in the Mediterranean that's been around for, at this point, over 600 years that they could model themselves off of, and they just kind of ignore it.
You mean San Marino?
San Marino or Venice.
The Venice isn't really a republic, dude. Don't even.
It is. Like it meets the definition of being a republic.
Oligarchic.
It's an oligarchical one for sure, but it's still a republic at this era.
Oh, but there is a few things that Louis XIV was actually good for, because his centralization was in response to France as a polity was always massively disunited. Not like before him. There were kings prior to him that did a really good job at centralizing. But Louis's time, France like 200 years ago, was so weak centrally, its duchies nearly overthrew it multiple times.
Yes, the fact of the matter is that there were major wars between French dukes who were basically kings in their own right. And France was so decentralized in this era that you had one duke go off and become the king of England, and then come back and try to take over the country.
Oh, and don't forget the other guy who tried to do the same thing with Germany. And then died on the fields of battle and gave Belgium to the Habsburgs.
Also, let's not forget, this was the country that essentially codified what we think of as chivalry.
Yeah, it's a French word, everyone.
Yeah.
And I curse them for it forever. This is where the term lingua franca comes from, is around this time, is the French are so dominant in Europe that every court, everywhere, speaks French.
Thanks, Louis XIV, you bastard.
But yeah, that whole thing of chivalry also led to the great things of like chivalric honor, which among other things, like to the intense and immense power of the nobility.
Yes.
Oh, like, also don't forget getting murdered horribly by peasant longbowmen in Agincourt.
That was fun. That was fun.
Yeah, that kind of put a damper on all that.
Somewhat. That's about 200 years earlier, but still.
It took a small girl claiming Jesus was talking to her to get France to stop feeling bad for itself because its king was too busy having a nervous breakdown.
She's blessed by God, but also brought the most artillery in Europe with her, possibly ever. She is, unironically, the patron saint of artillerymen everywhere.
I'm just envisioning during the French Republic this very cursed attempt to.
But yeah, no, I was going to the chivalry to kind of discuss some of the themes of this, in the sense that chivalry has evolved over time, and that's sort of what the whole swashbuckler and musketeer is sort of. It was sort of a revival, in a sense, of the chivalric kind of attitudes that had, honestly, at this point, become kind of laughed off. Like Don Quixote came out only a few decades before this, and it roasted chivalry. It was one of the most popular books in all of Europe, and it completely roasted chivalry.
The irony is
hilariously, Don Quixote also brought a revival of chivalric books back because it had the opposite effect in some places. Like They didn't realize it was a parody.
Well, I was just going to say there's a reason Miguel Cervantes was nearly killed for treason in Spain.
Yeah.
It also didn't help that Philip II, Philip the Man-Child, is a humorless asshole who effectively, it's really funny because he's the reason why Spaniards back in the day were considered dour, miserable people waiting to die.
Yeah.
To give you a point, the palace he built during his lifetime was once joked as being a monument to human suffering and misery. Because it is just so grim, gothic, and horrible looking.
The man was a true Catholic in that he hated himself above all other things.
So anyway, the themes of this book are decadence and romance.
Yes.
Honor and glory.
Now this
and
is actually
vengeance and
this is actually pretty good. Yeah, the flavor text for these was actually pretty good and plays quite well into the changeling stuff. We'll leave you to read them. They do mention an important thing though, which with love and romance, which is important to know about the Lost, is that changelings are very, very, very rarely going to have children. It is almost impossible. It requires either goblin contracts or a trip deep into the hedge to get a goblin fruit that can actually allow that. It's rare. It's very, very rare. So the fact of the matter is that if you want to throw like a curveball at a chronicle, would be to have like, yeah, there is a kid on the way from someone in your group, and that's a big incident for a changeling freehold. A freehold would probably be up over the moon over the idea of this, and also completely fucking terrified because that child's going to bring attention from the gentry.
Well, also decadence because this is the time of the Sun King.
Mm-hmm.
Also bring attention from the other side of the hedge.
Exactly.
Honor and glory, as mentioned, it's because Chivalry is coming back, mainly thanks to people unironically, while Cervantes is rolling in his grave screaming, "No! No!" And vengeance and betrayal, which this is because, yeah, there was a lot of court plots, intrigue, details is a reason why we mentioned Richelieu. And also, this is during the period where Alexandre Dumas wrote The Count of Monte Cristo. The eponymous tale of a man out to get vengeance.
Revenge?
No, Dumas was way later, dude. He was in the 1800s.
Yeah, but he wrote during this time.
It's set during this time.
Of this, yeah, just like, yeah.
The time frame. It's a good catch.
And again,
thanks for catching
as we're talking,
me on that.
And as we're talking about here, that's the theme that this chapter of the book wants to get across, is that you don't always need to be 100% historically accurate to have a historical game.
Oh, no. In fact, actually, sometimes you just take a couple liberties here and there. Like, if you have some weird conspiracies, like those old weird historical conspiracies, you can always feel free to throw one or two in there.
Like the poison necklace plot, or whatever it was. Was that the necklace affair? Hold on.
Wait. Or you can throw in some great things from the modern 2012 Three Musketeer movies. Everyone remember that?
Yeah, here we go. Affair of the Poisons. That's what it was called. This was a incident between around 1677 to 1682, where a lot of very influential noblemen were sentenced to death for poisoning and witchcraft, which included some of the inner circle of Louis XIV. There's a lot of people that died because of this. 36 executions in total.
In fact, fun fact, it's entirely possible that the affairs of the poisons, aka the necklace plots, probably inspired modern literature because of the whole using a necklace filled with poison plot that was used in the Song of Ice and Fire books.
There's also a lot of other little details involved with it where it was a huge scandal at the time, and it went all over the newspapers, which were just starting, of course, around this time, where
newspapers
you had that
were earlier, but yes.
Like, in terms of that were it influenced, they were starting to become much more influential. And on top of that, the story went international, similar to the Beast of Gévaudan, which also happened earlier in Louis XIV's reign. So yeah, like it's a weird world, and there is definitely the possibility where you have an idea of what's going on in other countries, but there's like all these other really dumb things too.
Reminds me of a fun joke pamphlet where the Spaniards were taught how to forget that every country but Spain existed once they crossed their borders.
Yes, it's stuff like that.
Yes, Philip II very much kind of turned Spain into Russia in terms of attitude. Well, actually, the Spanish in general were very dour and severe during this time period anyway, because they wanted to be treated as the most Catholic of nations.
Yes, and as I mentioned, the most Catholic thing possible is to hate everything, especially yourself.
And the last theme is identity and redemption. Because this is right at the ass end of Chivalry's revival.
Yes, and this is actually a fun little
The world has
snippet.
left the swashbuckler behind. The world is no longer as glamorous as it once was. The honor and glory of his summer years are hollow. The king he risked his life to protect has died and left his throne to an ungrateful brat. He has nothing left but empty hedonism and a pauper's grave.
Just tilt at that fucking windmill. Don't worry, Sancho will give you some spears to do it with.
Yeah.
While this may be tragic, the rootless nature of the lost often leads them to life of great adventure. They are free to roam as they please. They might live simple common men, roaming from village to village, or they might become artisans who create works of otherworldly beauty. They might reinvent themselves as mysterious nobles from a country you've never heard of, and spend their evenings whining, dining, and betting the elites of Versailles. They might become saviors of the commons, who might right wrongs and defend people from the properties of others and their fellow mans. They might be heroes.
They might.
I also want to note that the idea of passing yourself off as fake nobility was obscenely common back in the day.
Yeah,
it was a cause of several major scandals in France at this time.
There's a reason. Yeah, there was a reason pretty much within any quote unquote any modern court back in the day. They had specific people specified to remember pretty much every irrelevant fucking heraldry.
Yes.
It gets funnier. That wouldn't happen to you. One of these conmen actually became king of Montenegro.
Yes, that's true.
The question is he really a con man if he becomes a king?
Yes, he still is, but he's also a king now.
But it doesn't matter because the people said yes to it.
Yeah. I think there was also this also became part of the diamond necklace affair, which is another famous French scandal about the end of the monarchy, so a little out of this time.
The Ottomans had a recurring problem called the attempts by the false Mustafa, where effectively one of the sons of the Sultan, hence the name Mustafa, managed to survive the culling of his brothers and tried to rebel against the rightful Sultan at the time. This actually happened twice, where the Ottomans faced revolts because a dude pretended to be the dead son of the previous sultan.
I mean, if you want to talk about pretender wars, he still can't beat Russia. But anyway,
Russia has the.
Oh yeah, this is during the Troubles.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's right at. I think it's just afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. The other mood, of course, at the end of this is Baroque heroism, which is that it's a world of deep intrigues and labyrinthine alliances, and it's a beautiful madness of just like everything has a purpose, but it can be completely wild. Like one of the bits with that is like like the Devils of Loudun is just before this time period, and it's like it's completely wacko, but it's a logical sort of wacko, you know.
Honestly, yeah, this is around the time of the tulip boom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Honestly, I think for mood for some players, in instance, think of this as a less morbid and intense / dark version of like sort of like the normal vampire politics that seems to go like that always seem to go on in vampire games. It's stuff like that and stuff like that, but
actually, yeah, describing it as a Vampire the Masquerade game, but where you play the Three Musketeers is pretty spot on.
Yeah, that's
like I said, just a little less intense and depressing.
That can be Changeling a lot of the time, actually. But in this case, it's
very specifically, yeah, because all the things about the court and the vampires always have this fucking aristocracy thing. They always try, even the ones that aren't usually like they always like have these stupid titles and stuff like that. So that kind of thing, what I'm talking about.
France and Le Grand Ciel. I think it might be a
Le
Polish.
Grand Ciel.
It looks misspelled.
Might be. Anyway, the Sun King. It's to talk, and it's about how the seasonal courts interact with him.
Yeah, it's kind of important to note. The seasonal courts are consolidating their power as well, like because as was mentioned in the last one, there's a lot of smaller little courts around, just in general. But in around this time, you get more of a consolidation towards these myths and these legends, and the nature of fairy tales kind of changes a little bit. So the seasonal courts become more important. This isn't to say that there aren't like little courts running around Europe all the time, as we've seen those before. But one of the fun things about Changeling Second Edition is that you can just say, "Fuck it, we're all running a different kind of court."
Also, this just isn't my thing. I just want to iterate with a lot of creatures in the world of darkness. There's sort of weird connections between them. Like vampires, you always kind of know, unless in the very, very weird and bizarre circumstances to where your master sires you and then fucks off and just leaves you for some reason. You always sort of know your place. Same thing with even werewolves, because typically a pack will find you pretty quickly, even if somehow you were born outside of the thing. Mages, they're a bit things, but mage societies are pretty normal and they kind of find you. Changelings don't usually have that advantage because they're always hiding. So they're not. So if finding a court,
finding one another. Changelings can instantly recognize each other on sight because the mask doesn't work on them. So they always know if they're looking at another changeling, most of the time.
But that's not getting to that they still have to find each other. The big old open world.
Not as big as you think, because again, they don't usually drift too far out among each other. Mm-hmm. It's more just knowing where to look.
I know, but I'm saying like when someone escapes the hedge, they have no fucking idea what's going on.
Yeah. You could actually run a very fun campaign with that set in like the middle of the US, and you're all just dumped in the middle of like bumfuck Nowheresville.
No, here's how you do it. I think the record you can go is about 50 years before you have trouble.
50 to 100 is usually the cutoff. Like,
okay,
there's people that for whatever reason, like there's a location they're able to get towards, or there's a.
So here's my idea. It takes place in Omaha, Nebraska, right?
Why would you subject them to Omaha?
Because this is the joke. Every one of you are time traveled from different areas. So, like, you have 1970s New Zealand. You have 1990s Northern Japan. 2005 Zimbabwe. Like, you start from different parts of the world.
How the fuck did you all end up in Omaha, though? Did you, like, all end up on the same, like, road out of the hedge?
There was an incident.
You all got the same master.
No. And it was just a nexus problem. Basically, there is an incident in Omaha where the hedge comes pretty close to there for like a few months.
And so you all slipped out then. Okay.
You're not the only ones. Like, a bunch of people from around the world get dumped there. Like, for a bit, it's almost like Iceland. Like, for some weird reason, the blur between hedge and reality, Arcadia, thins there for a time before something fixes that thinning.
But yeah, I just more want to reiterate that fact, because when you can run a changeling game, that could actually be a factor of it. For instance, like some of these changelings might have been with the courts for decades,
not centuries. After that, decades, you've become something else.
Yeah, that you might for like a decade or two, because they still live longer than normal. But
you cut out there. So
hey,
you cut out
changelings. Or you could be a fresh face. You just you discovered that there are more people like you.
I just have the gag of some poor bastard getting teleported out in 2000 or so, and then he comes back in 2021, and he was a he played the stock market, right? Oh, imagine being so angry at all of those .com investments that fucking burst.
On one hand, you didn't have to throw yourself out a window, though.
What's worse? They all burst, or the guy who took your life made off with all the money?
The guy who replaced your life.
Your fetch lost it all in the .com bubble, and you're like,
no, he didn't lose it all. He didn't lose it all. He made it big. He invested in his little shit company called Apple.
No, he does that, but then he blows it all.
Called Amazon.
No, but then he blows it all during the crypto burst.
Oh no!
He blew it all at BitConnect. So you find out your fetch was living the fancy life and then fucking cratered it. There's just something magical about that.
That sounds incredibly depressing, honestly. Yeah.
But now, speaking of depressing, Paris.
Oh yeah, Paris. Always depressing. But yeah, in any case, like the Robe and the Sword, they go over kind of like the basics of what the life at Versailles is. But
sorry, I just have to read this. I just have to read this line. The Sun King did not rule from its capital. He detested Paris.
Yeah.
To give you an idea, Versailles was built precisely because Parisians had a habit of holding the king fucking hostage.
Yeah, they did. Repeatedly. I forgot about that.
That's why Versailles was built. Essentially because they needed a glorified fortress. I mean, it was an eloquent. Yeah, it was glorified. Like, the amount of money that went into it was ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. It's still funny, though, because it's like, oh, yeah.
Paris is such a shithole that keeps holding my family hostage. I refuse to go there anymore.
Also, it's loud and smelly.
They're holding them hostage usually over either bread or taxes, sometimes both.
Or religion.
I think that did happen once, yes. And then you had Richelieu at the barricades with a cannon, getting rid of that problem.
So here's they go into the Sun King's routine, and what they do. No one was permitted to eat before he broke fast.
Yeah, there was also a dedicated butt wiper for the king. It was considered a very honorable position. I'm not joking.
Oh, here's something cursed. In the royal chapel, the king's pew alone faced the altar. The other pews faced him.
But yeah.
Also, the great things of formal address. When you address the king, make sure to lightly scratch your pinky finger on your left arm.
I'd forget that so bad.
You also have there's a proper hour. There's a proper thing a nail to scratch him with. There's a proper way to knock on a fucking door. Like, there is so many little details. And again, this all seems completely pointless. But the point of it was to make the nobles obsess about something completely different.
Well, also that's because Louis XIV was a power-hungry megalomaniac.
Well, yeah, but it did have a practical purpose in the sense that all of this essentially all the petty bullshit he invented. He made it seem so important to the nobles that they got invested in it.
Yeah.
By the way, you can thank this asshole for neckties if you don't like wearing them.
Yes, ties became fashion because of Louis.
Yeah. Thanks, Louis, you fuck.
Yeah, anyway, Paris, the city of 500,000 people.
Paris is a shithole, even back then.
Yeah, they created a royal police force, and by police force, I mean the beat up the poor squad.
Not beat up the poor squad. The round up the poor and shove them in somewhere else.
By the way, the saddest part is this is the first time that they've actually ever made a police force for Paris.
Yeah. It took them until the 1600s to have an actual royal police force.
To give you an idea on how incompetent and horrible that is, the Romans were not even the first to come up with a police force. The ancient fucking Egyptians did. They because there was a specific tribe from Kush, from Nubia, that they actually had an agreement where they served as city guardsmen and watchmen during the Old Kingdom period of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, not Old. Middle Kingdom. I'm sorry.
Also,
in any case,
it's actually about that royal police force that also it's subtly dissuading you from playing a poor changeling. You might get rounded up by the secret police.
You might get rounded up by the police and thrown into the madhouse.
Well, no, there's the Hospital General.
With iron manacles.
No, come on.
Can't get out.
Come on. You could be put into the Hospital General, a facility that's a literal fucking prison and workhouse.
Yeah, as it says, more than one low-coded changeling has found himself there in iron manacles and unable to escape.
Don't you want to be placed in essentially a poor person prison? That sounds like a great game.
Welcome to Bedlam. The next bit about all this is that we've got all these beautiful buildings that are coming up all over Paris this time. All these cathedrals, all of this. Then of course you have the fact that Paris is actually at this point one of the kind of
metropolis.
Yeah, it's not just a metropolis; it's a multinational metropolis. It is a major center of world power, and
it caught up with like the other trading nations. At this point.
Catch up. Paris was always pretty impressive back in the day. This is when it truly shined because
this is when it really kicks in, yeah.
Because you ask for it, you'll find it. Senegalese traders, as they mention, Algonquins, people from
Chinese,
Chinese. You name a continent, you can find people plying their goods from there.
Madame Zhao is a Ming Dynasty refugee and one of the most skilled. I'm not gonna try and say that word.
Oneiromancers. Basically, they studied the art of dreaming.
Well, she's also can apparently roll around at the speed of sound with all those hedgehog spines.
Oh, that's because of the fact that this is a lost one.
I know. I'm making a joke.
Yeah, the other thing to note is that the idea of France as a national entity is very much in its infancy right now. Most people would identify themselves either as the language they speak, such as Breton, Languedoc, Occitan, the city they're from, or their region.
Actually, a good example, if you want a more modern version, is right after the Greek War of Independence. They didn't see themselves like, yes, they had a belief that all Hellenes should be freed, but at the end of the day, they saw themselves where they came from, like Moriots, Maniots, Speriots, Chiosians.
Yeah, I mean, they all. I mean, in the case of the French, they all recognize they are subject of France. That does not mean they're French.
No, like that guy's a Picard. He's from Picardy, and that person's from Gascon.
That's a Burgundian.
Yeah. It's also important to note that there are a lot of different cultures that will be stamped down heavily during this period by Louis XIV in order to create the idea of a unified national identity.
To give you an idea, the French language as we understood it. People make a joke that you go 10 miles in the United Kingdom and you'll find a completely different language because of how varied the English dialects are. French was worse.
I think if you really make that joke, call it Italy.
Italy is almost as bad.
Italy is it's
they never really stomped out the native tongues.
Nope.
In France, they tried, but there's a reason there's still Languedoc languages. Occitan.
There's still Languedoc. There's still, to some degree, Bretonnian.
There's also a third language group. I forget what it. Provençal.
There's the Basques.
No, Provençal
as well. Oh yeah, there is.
That's the that's the Swiss French language.
Yep.
And then even there you can devolve it because there's Normand, and then there's Picard, then there's based on regions, like just subtle isms about it. Yeah, Louis is the one that kind of squishes a lot of that down.
Also, as I mentioned, just a little thing there. Despite being ostensibly a Catholic and recognizing the Pope, he didn't recognize the Pope at all. His authority pretty much at all. He was like the Pope didn't have any power in France, really.
Nope, not at all.
He proclaimed France the Church's first daughter, but this was a man who also effectively told the Pope, "Yeah, if you try to put people into the cathedrals, I'm not listening to you on that." France is my nation.
This is not, for the record, this is a completely different king, but just to show the French attitude in regards to their relationship with the Pope, there was a particular time when the King of France flat out just sent hitmen to murder the Pope in Rome.
Yeah,
and they did.
There's another French king. Yeah, there's another French king that abducted the Pope and moved him to Avignon for a while.
That was actually one of them, but there were other periods where Avignon was the seat. Because that's France for a time. There was a town called Avignon where the official Pope lived there because of a variety of factors, ranging from French kidnapping to the city of Rome revolting against them, to the Holy Roman Emperor stomping in and putting his own candidate. It was a fucking mess. And it's that affair that lasted, I believe, a full century, 100 years.
Yes, there were 2 popes for at least 2 centuries, if I remember correctly, there was the Pope in Avignon, then the Pope in Rome, which then had other issues involved with it due to the German emperors, like who is all that, and it's a mess. And
that's why we had the Protestant Reformation, kids.
Partially, the Protestant Reformation was later, but one of my favorite bits with this.
I just wanted to address that because despite this place being ostensibly Catholic and very anti-Protestant, you don't try and bring the Pope in here.
Yes,
and they were still massively anti-Protestant because
pogroms aplenty.
Yeah, he revoked the Edict of Nantes, that essentially removed any degree of religious freedom in this country.
I'm pretty sure that's after Richelieu died, who was one of the ones that was actually pushing for that, because holy fuck, the wars of religion, man. We need to stop these.
Well, also, the thing is, the Edict of Nantes was still pretty harsh anyway. There was a prior edict that was already destroyed because there was a thing called the Affair of the Placards. Where either some Catholic priest trying to frame Protestants or just idiotic Protestants spammed the city. This was about 100 years prior. Spammed the cities with documents basically advocating and trying to convert. And the French king at that time, I believe it was Henri II, fucking detested that.
I mean,
yeah,
but I just want to read this part. Their homes revoked and introduced the Edict of, I'm not saying that name, effectively legalizing persecution. Their homes and churches were burned, their businesses seized, and all Protestant public officials were given 2 weeks or convert on pain of death.
Fun fact.
As a result, 500,000 Protestants left.
Fun fact, there actually were attempts by the Protestants during this time to try to set up a colony. Well, they eventually got murdered to a man by the Portuguese because they accidentally settled in Brazil.
Yeah.
Anyway,
no one wants to go to Brazil. Except the Portuguese.
And the French.
And the French Protestants,
but the Jews had a better time. The Jews had a great time under Louis in the sense that he made it so that Christians can convert, could actually interact with them and not be kept completely in the ghetto. No, they're still kept in the ghetto for the record, but they don't have to leave. They can leave without the fear of death by the state.
Yeah. There's also the fact that you can actually talk to them now legally without the Jew getting killed.
That's what I'm talking to.
Only because Louis managed to annex Alsace-Lorraine.
Yeah, it's literally money. Yeah.
They annexed Alsace-Lorraine. There was a decent Jewish community over there, and he wanted to be able to not even just get their money from loans, just essentially extort them.
Yeah. Yeah. In any case, there's definitely a lot of lost among everyone
that's not
here.
the most cursed anti-Jewish law I ever remember. Did you know there was a pope who demanded that all Jews had to wear a gigantic yellow hat?
Yes, there was. That I can't remember the name of him, but he did order that.
I think it was like Julius II or something.
It's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, this is both incredibly ridiculous and incredibly it's really cruel, but it's also kind of funny because it's just so stupid.
Let's say some good things. This was also the era of the birth of the coffee shop.
Yeah. This is the era where, as people are becoming more literate over time, you start seeing novels being written, at least in Europe.
So if you fucking hate Starbucks, you can thank Louis for that too.
No, Starbucks is a bit of a different type of coffee house. We're talking the really, really the ones that you find that may also serve ice cream, and they're kind of in a brick building somewhere, and next to a school.
Oh, you mean the ones that actually aren't complete awful?
Yeah, that's kind of what these were, because what these were they were a lot like a salon, basically. It was where people would just get together to talk about the news and have something to drink or to eat and to talk and trade ideas and gossip a lot.
Yeah, I call those pubs.
Basically, it's a pub without the drinking.
And that's why cafes never made sense to me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. They introduced and then in arts education they introduced more about one of the some of the quote-unquote characters here, as well as it dropped the name of the Guild of Sacred Journey.
where that's a thing from a book linked to first edition Changeling, which is Lords of the Summer. Dark Heroes is in a weird spot where it wants to do both second edition Changeling and first edition Changeling things. So you get little references like this.
And there's just a little blurb here about how in August 1640 there was a solar eclipse and people went nuts and thought the dumb things happened.
Yes, the next thing to note is that the town and country means that urban populations are exploding in size at this period of time. This is the start of the rise of the urbanized society in basically the entire world as agricultural methods are finally improving vastly. The introduction of new crops for the new world has taken root, so to speak, especially with potatoes, to allow the feeding of much, much larger populations, even in times of relative hardship compared to everything else. It's
also, this is a reminder, like this is still the era of the Little Ice Age, but yeah.
Yeah, like it's not everything good here with agriculture, but it's definitely going back up. And this also means
the Lost, this actually makes it good for them because back in the olden days, there were not really these large communities. So if you got caught and dragged to the hedge and a fetch replaced you, well, unless they believed in the fair folk and, actually believed that you were taken by them, you were fucked.
Yeah,
so you had to live out in the woods and poop in them and hope that the werewolf didn't murder you.
Also, as a slightly minor thing, the hedges, obviously it's the metaphorical blah 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 metaphorical. It's also slightly literal in the sense that it rarely appears in like immensely urbanized areas. Or at least it's harder for it to.
Kinda, yeah.
Sorta. It's more the idea of it's basically a barrier and liminal space between the realms of the Fae and reality itself.
Yeah, and the more people there are, the more reality is centered.
Generally tends to be fixed, yes, but that's just because the hedge is also very good at concealing itself as things that aren't. Like a pile of trash could theoretically be a gateway into the hedge.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway,
it's also
okay.
I was gonna say the last thing about urban things. Mm-hmm. It's easier for changelings to get to find each other because, well, let's this way.
That's not the point I was going to make, but okay. I was just going to say, you know what having a large population allows you to do? Get back into society so you don't have to murder people on the road for their wallets. That's all I wanted to say.
I was just going to say, with all the people together, it's easier for changelings to find each other without having to travel miles between villages.
Yeah.
Anachronisms.
Yeah, this is the part where they basically go like, yeah, this is a basic overview of it, and if you want to toss most of this out for whatever game you're running, we're not that mad at you.
I mean, do your own research. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It could also be kind of interesting to note that because of this, Fae that had been abducted earlier in the century might come back and be basically as astonished as a Fae from, say, a Changeling from, like, say, 1914 that comes back to 2022. Like, suddenly, everything is very, very different in the world.
What's a mirror?
Yeah, that's
more accurately, mirrors are now cheaper, and people buy them.
Not only that, but windows are starting to become popular, too.
Yes, glass windows are now... Yeah. Glass windows are now becoming a fashionable thing. There is a fork. It has been introduced from Italy into the French way of eating.
Style of fashion has completely changed. There's a lot more printing presses. Literacy is more available. The concept of a coffee shop is new.
Yeah, there's
access to the drink from Africa is much more common. There are people that are from India able to talk to. If you want to talk to people from India, you can.
Yeah, like there's literally a merchant from India who is in France right now selling things and will travel back to India to get more things occasionally. Mm-hmm. Like you get kind of the idea here. There's then the other places outside of France, of course, there is
the high seas because this is the golden age of piracy.
Yep, they're talking about like a few fun bits like these are just changeling characters. It could be like if you want to do all that. feel free.
Like,
then they're talking about
there's an actual goddamn pirate king.
Yeah. This is actually one of the golden ages of European piracy as well as overseas. There's a resurgence in pirate activity around the English Channel as everyone is fighting everyone there.
Yeah, because for France, a war just ended, and what do you do with all those sailors who don't have a job now?
There's also a war going on between the English and the Dutch, which the Dutch will repeatedly dab on the English until they don't. Including the very famous raid up the Thames, which seizes much of the English fleet, burns down a bunch of the other chunks of it, and then sails out basically unmolested. It is one of the greatest dabs in naval history. There's no other way to put it, but they just got dabbed on.
Nick Nye, who's trying to set up the Welsh East Company.
Yeah.
And then it's just a little blurb about how essentially Habsburg Holy Roman Empire is going through immense diarrhea right now.
Yeah, the 30 Years' War has just ended and things are a bit fucked. There is going to be eventually the War of the Spanish Succession, which completely fucks over the Austrians again.
Also, the Ottomans,
and the Ottomans also are kind of on the downturn now. From
are we talking about the two big screw ups of Europe?
Yeah, the retarded kids in the classroom. In any case, though, there's various years and various things, and they're talking a little bit about other changelings.
Oh god, the changeling pirates look so cool.
I know, I love them, don't you?
I thought those were goblins.
They are, but they're also changelings.
Look at them.
Ray. I love them. They're adorable.
They look like something I'd see in Warhammer Fantasy earlier editions.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what this era is Warhammer Fantasy in many ways. They then talk about like Great Britain and everything kind of going nuts over there.
Yeah, Britain's in the middle of a civil war.
Yeah, there's the fact that the 1660s in London were completely fucking awful.
Oh, don't forget good old Oliver Cromwell's great destruction of Ireland.
Yep, there's
and English
all
society. And English society.
Yeah, he did a lot of damage.
There's also the year 1660 is kind of notable because 1666 is finally when the plague leaves London after 20% of the population dies.
Isn't that also where the Great Fire of London happens?
Yes, it is. That's when the Great Fire of London happens. And to top it all off, Isaac Newton discovers the prism.
This is, of course, before he blows all of his money on terrible stock market options.
Not only that, but also ends up in a war with a counterfeiter, which he sort of loses for a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, England is keeping to themselves for the most part at the moment.
It's not going too great, yeah. There's Spain, Spain. We don't really need to talk much more than there is Charles II, who eventually is born.
Spain, the place where you might unironically find people who haven't realized that the Habsburgs are in charge because they don't know anything.
The poor management of Charles II. That's a fucking understatement. For those wondering, Charles II is known by his title in Spain as El Hechizado, the Bewitched. That's because he's the most inbred monarch of Europe, to the point where, in the words of his medical physician, when he died, he considered it a providence of God he lived as long as he did.
He continuously befuddled Christendom by continuing to live.
I need to read this. A disturbing rumor has reached the freeholds of France. There are reports from the Lost that claims Charles II is actually a fetch. A twisted simulacrum of the king made by an unfired email and mismatched mosaic tiles. Which more, a drudge in Seviers claims himself to be Charles, returned from the hedge. The veracity of his claim is questionable as his durance has twisted him beyond recognition. Replacing the fetch of the king might be nigh impossible. However, the temptation to have a mortal monarch be one of the Lost is irresistible to many.
You know, the sad thing is, that's both not entirely implausible. given how fetches behaves, that they because can't they start malfunctioning as they get older?
They can,
or they could just be made badly.
Which that would make sense, but on the other hand, I think it's more cursed that this is just what happens with normal humans decide to have only 3 grandparents. Yeah, Charles II's family tree was so fucking twisted. He only had 3 grandparents. Isn't that great?
Yeah. I mean, that's even less gifts at Christmas. I mean, it's like, fuck, that's...
There's a reason why the only thing he was interested in was shooting guns, and he didn't bathe.
And wait. Oh, and don't forget waiting to die.
Also, don't forget him randomly just staring off or screaming.
The man was but then we get into kind of the fun bit of this, which is
they built
all of the the new world, which includes the first time a changeling meets a tomato. The ashen courtiers marvel at the bounty of the harvest. Goblin fruits of all shapes and sizes cover the table. Fragrant dimbajube, waxy amaranthine, decadent cocorange, bundles of coupe-nettle, even a few hide fruit glisten like precious gems among the spread. There was one fruit that puzzled them all. Matilde was the first to pick it up. She turned it over in her palms and shook her head. "It's a beautiful color," she said in a bit lamely, and handed it over to Cortrand. He sniffed it and frowned. "I don't trust it," he said. "It smells of madness and death." "Wait," said Sprintinaria, grabbing the fruit from the beast's hands. "I think I've heard of this." She placed the fruit on the table again. "It appears to be a tomato. They're from Mexico and New Spain." And they all sit around, they're nodding and murmuring. They're like, "What's it for?" "We don't know."
Fun fact, it took, I think, 100 years for the tomato to make widespread... not even 100, 150. It took 150 years.
A lot of that was because of what happened with how you were eating tomatoes oftentimes was with pewter silverware, where because tomatoes are acidic, it would eat through there and therefore poison you.
Well, what also doesn't help is that this is the 1840s was when taxonomy became popular. And this is right when the taxonomic tree was designed. And they found quite easily that the tomato's closest sibling, plant-wise, is nightshade.
That's the other thing, yeah.
It's a member of the nightshade family.
But
so that you were considered a madman if you ate from it because it killed so many people who ate from pewter.
Anyway, I'm gonna bring you down, Tech, again from the New World. It says, while for people this is a new beginning, for others it's very different. A Huron woman emerges from the hedge, her body and soul torn to shreds by the thorns, only to find everyone she's ever known and loved is dead from smallpox.
Yep.
A man flees from bondage in Arcadia, only to find that he's in a foreign land where all his family are now slaves on a sugar plantation and likely to die within a year.
Yep.
The European lost. Some are upset. Most don't care. Most really don't care.
They got bigger problems.
They forgot that the Catholic Church, interestingly enough, I'm not standing for them, I'm just pointing out, that of all of the early opponents of the church, while half-assed, the Catholic Church was one of them.
Well, it's
the slave trade.
Super
if they converted. Well, especially mostly if they converted.
I'll point out it's super half-assed, but some of the earliest critics were churchmen.
One of the first ones was the guy was a Spaniard who was witnessing what was happening in Spain with the natives, and basically went, "They have souls, you monsters! You can't be just murdering them, like enslaving them and leaving them to die. Like, why are you doing this? Take slaves from Africa instead." And
they have missiles.
They listened to him, and then he's like, "Oh wait, no, this is also just equally as terrible. Please stop."
Okay, here, how about something actually fun that can't be twisted? The masks.
Yes.
It's going out of fashion, but you can still, because of the whole anachronistic thing, it's still perfectly fine to use them around this time.
Yep.
So if you want to play Baroque period Batman, sure.
Yeah. I mean like the dumb masquerade noble parties.
No, I'm just envisioning someone wearing, like, you could go full Zorro.
I mean, yeah, you could.
And I kind of like that you can turn Changeling into just I forget.
A swashbuckling adventure, yes.
Well, not just a swashbuckling adventure. You could go full old-timey superhero, or one of those what-ifs where they're transplanted to a different time. I think it was Gotham by Gaslight was an example, where it was the Victorian period.
Yeah, there's some weird shit.
I think there's also 1620 for Marvel.
Yeah, I read that. It's not the greatest. There's a few neat ideas, then the rest of it's just like garbage.
Didn't they make Blackbeard the thing? Because they did do that once.
No, they didn't.
Oh, they didn't?
It was
because in the old
didn't.
Marvel comics, Edward Teach didn't actually exist. It was Ben Grimm wearing a beard.
Okay, well that wasn't in 20 because
back and into the drudgery. Daily life for the average changeling is actually, from its describes, not very fun, not really great.
Not very.
Like
it's very different from. Yeah, it's different from what it was later on. The seasonal courts are still evolving. The fact of the matter is that contracts are very, very different as well, where there's a lot of changes in terms of what's available for you to have. Travel, because it's important, means that certain travel contracts are much more important. Certain
also,
contracts
people have to rely on the fucking hedge much more.
Also,
yes,
which ain't good.
And just eating might be dangerous because all your new utensils are probably made of raw iron.
Yes, that's true too. A kitchen could be one of the most dangerous places to be for a fae. Well, not a fae, well, a changeling. Also a fae, because there's just so much fucking iron in them.
I'm just envisioning this cursed image of like the masked Zorro musketeer changeling man, the goblin.
Yeah.
Sword fighting with the fucking chef, this fat French chef, using an iron spatula.
You must eat the frog legs. I have put them on the iron skewer.
Can't you see it? And isn't it glorious?
Yeah, I can. It's pretty glorious.
This one actually reads kind of interesting. The early modern era is an era of optimism. Though the first utopian novel, Thomas More's Utopia, was published about 100 years ago, Bacon's posthumously published New Atlantis and Campbella's City of the Sun are both recent examples of this kind of utopian idea. The lost have taken notice. Some bridge masons, inspired by Christopher Wren, have taken to turning their cities into walled utopias.
Oh no, they're turning them into raptures.
They're making states within states.
Yeah.
I'm reading it. They go into it literally is rapture. It is their belief that skepticism, rationalism, and disbelief in the supernatural can continue to grow, have fewer places to enter the world. So they're effectively trying to get rid of the gentry or kick them away from them.
They're trying to cancel the fae.
This feels like rapture from Bioshock.
They're trying to not believe. They're trying to not believe in the supernatural while clearly being supernatural.
No, they're trying to make the mortals not believe in the supernatural in the hopes that it will weaken the fae. Which is kind of brilliant, because fae do rely on stories.
Mm-hmm. And disbelief.
Yes. Now, the next bit is the gentry, and, well, the gentry are the gentry.
Yep.
They talk a bit about privateers, they talk a bit about that. Not much is really that different.
The fae and the gentry don't really change that much across the centuries.
Yeah. Well, they do and they don't.
How they behave when in the mortal world is determined by the stories told. And that's about it. In terms of mentality, they're very similar.
Yeah. The seasonal courts, they then talk about the fact that these are really when they're starting to get into it. And so they put in a couple of other courts that are around at this time too, eventually, but like, the Court of the North Star, all these other like
lesser courts that eventually get folded in or destroyed.
Yes. Because courts are as much a supernatural thing as a political thing. They talk a lot about the desire and, of course, the spring and the nature of all that and rituals that you do and divinations and all that. Really, we can kind of go through this because this is basically just, if you've read Changeling, and I highly recommend you do, it kind of sums up Changeling.
Yeah. And so these are the 4 seasons right here.
Yeah. Then they go into holidays and festivals of this era, which is quite fun.
Tournament of the Hollyhock.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, it's a large-scale chess tournament.
Yeah.
Oh, this reminds me of, if I remember right, there's a great John Carter story called The Chessmen of Mars, where the plot is essentially this mad tyrant kidnaps the eponymous hero, and he has to play a death game where he plays the piece in the version of Martian chess they have called, I think it's called Jeddah, where essentially you have to move the piece to the course, but you have to play the rules of the game, and that's how combat worked. You had to fight to the death when you met another tile, and that determined if your piece, you yourself, were taken.
Yeah, that's kind of what they do here. But like the next bit is
it literally is. I love it.
Yeah,
that's cute.
Yeah, it's great. These are Fey festivals, which I find really fun.
Feast of St. John, interesting.
Feast of St. John is a festival of early harvest, the bounty of the freehold in summer. It's conducted at night, and it is when hidden things are eliminated, lost items have a tendency to reappear, and it's often an evening where newly emancipated changelings manage to get through the hedge. So it's also the only night of the year where the bitter lilacs bloom, which can be dried and brewed into tea. Any lost who imbibe this beverage will be intermittently haunted with visions of their durance.
What's durance again? I don't remember.
That's the time they spent in the service of the Fae. And often being horribly abused.
Why the hell would you drink this?
The reason why they talk about this is so that you can essentially force a changeling to lose clarity, like as a poison. I think is more the intention of this.
Yeah, the intrigue element. This would be like you put hemlock into their tea.
Yeah, where you can't kill someone as according to the rules, but you can definitely try to drive them mad.
Then there's queen, pawn takes queen. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, the Fête Fae is a mask held annually.
The party of the bads. It sounds like. No, the party of the foul.
Yeah, it's a mask.
It's like the Prince of Fools, where that festival in Paris, where you pick the town drunk and you basically hurl abuse at them.
Yeah, and there's a lot
it's also like Saturnalia, where things got topsy-turvied.
Then there's the frozen market, which is basically that it is only occurs in years where the Seine River is solidly frozen, and the market opens then. It is a silent auction, which can vary wildly in what items are available. The winners are always anonymous, obviously, because it is the Winter Court, along with the auctioneer themselves. So, just flavor stuff, really.
Grand intrigues, which, makes sense.
These are kind of just ideas for, like, do you want a big story plot thing to throw in your chronicle at this time?
And the Empress of the North Star is one of them.
Yep. The next one is Rennes in summer 1683, which is talking about sort of the way that the fact of the matter is that the village is kind of interesting, and it is right on kind of the area of Bretagne and the rest of France, because they're kind of like, let's face it, the Bretons are French, but they're a very special kind of French.
They're the Celtic kind of French.
Exactly.
They came from Cornwall.
Or they've moved to Cornwall. Who knows?
No, it's like based on linguistic drift. We've actually documented that the Bretons are the result of Cornish people moving across
because they weren't Cornish at the time.
Dialects intermingled.
Oh, they weren't probably called Cornish at the time.
That's why technically, while on the continent, it in all honesty is still considered. I think it's called insular Gaelic.
Yeah,
it is not. So they talk continental. That all went extinct.
So this bit is just another like plot thing of like, so you want some intrigue here. They're talking about the problems in Nantes and these freeholds in Paris. And
the fact that there are these warlords from Brittany that's causing trouble.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of complications that they mentioned that could be here, and here's how to get the players involved. This is more of a GM bit.
These are adventure hooks.
Yeah, but it definitely is. Yeah, it's adventure hooks along with some statistics for some of the people involved. And then they go into character creation and they talk about like what are skills that would be different here.
Oh boy, the dragon.
Also, the flat out just saying you can't play an atheist.
Yeah, like there's really no atheists in this time period.
Well, if there are, they don't say that.
Yeah, exactly. The proper term would be either agnostic or deist, usually, was what they would actually say to avoid getting, well...
Well, remember, France has publicly said, if you're Protestant, you burn to death.
Exactly. This is one of the reasons why one of the most famous, but at the same time, one of the most famous churchmen of all time in France, Talleyrand, was famously kind of an atheist, despite being a bishop.
I'm trying to see if this is just something we're talking about or if it's in the book.
It's in the book.
Ah.
It's past.
Oh yeah, here we go. Sorry,
yeah.
Are you religious?
Yeah, are you religious? Where you're from? Do you care about politics at all? Things like that. So
can you read?
Can you read? That's a big one.
Well, the thing is, can you read kind of determines whether you care about politics.
That is true.
Because let's be honest, you only care about politics and you don't care about it until the wheat starts not coming in.
I mean, the king. I mean, most of the kings of England didn't know how to read or write.
Yeah.
Until the 1400s.
Yeah.
Let's be fair. You weren't political until that happened, or if you could read and write and you were part of a guild, usually.
Or politics got to you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're tapped by a noble or something and you're part of the courtier system.
No, what I mean is you were just a simple Protestant peasant who had to throw away all those Protestant little prayer things and just say, I mean, I'm Catholic, totally.
That's about it.
Yeah, they then go into what are.
I'm just pointing this out because they make a point, and especially since you can be at any point in time, like 50 years. Hey, you could have been a Huguenot. That originally you thought, oh yeah, you could have been a Huguenot during the religious wars.
Yes.
And you come back and find out your side lost.
Also, you might view the gentry as demons, which makes some sense. But yes, they go into academics and a summary of what are skills like in this era and talking about that, which, while interesting, is also just padding. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean, academics works the same way. It's just the only real change is it's your standard humanities, the basic sciences, and also theology, because a learned man was also a godly man. You learned at least some theology.
Yes,
if it wasn't a specialty.
One of the things I think is changed a bit is medicine.
Medicine is different. They talk about that. They talk a bit about ride, of course, and survival actually being more important.
Are Enigmas still their attempt to do computers?
Enigma is the replacement for computer, and it just basically represents how good are you at code breaking and incredibly complicated interpretations of things.
Fair enough. Crafts make sense. Investigation, well, I mean, that's still a thing.
That's still a thing. Medicine, of course.
You gotta love that we didn't learn how to wash our hands until the 1880s.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of doctors that resisted that idea for a very long time.
Here's another one. Sterilizing tools didn't become a serious thing until the 1910s, if I remember right. No,
that is also
1870s for them. Washing your hands was the 1900s innovation.
Yes, it was.
By an Austrian man. An Austrian doctor noticed if you washed your hands before you delivered a baby was less likely to die. Do you know what the Kaiser did in response to this this moment of wisdom? Locked him in a fucking sanitarium.
Oh,
yes.
I'm not kidding. He was thrown into a nut house.
He was thrown into a sanitarium because he was yelling at everyone to wash their fucking hands all the time. There was a children's magazine named Muse that I read back in the day that talked about this doctor and this whole story and the nature of hand washing and how it was related to it and the crazy opposition. It was quite good for
sterilizing tools was a thing in the 1870s because Lister noticed, I accidentally dropped my scalpel in alcohol and the man's wounds didn't go bad.
Yeah. Maybe if I keep doing that, they won't happen, and then that's kind of how that spread.
And then hand washing was done by an Austrian man who was screaming in his straitjacket, "Wash your hands before touching me.
Before you touch me, you dirty, dirty boys!"
Speaking let's move to merits, and there's some differences in the sense that you'll have the language essentially merit regardless, but you only start with 1 pip, aka your first language.
And then there's a merit to just be literate.
Yeah, because that takes
that
effort.
honestly should be a thing in earlier settings as well, but it's just
it wasn't thought of until now, which is fair.
This is something where it's like
it also just may not have even been relevant in the sense that the idea, like maybe the idea of you being literate is so rare they don't even suggest
I'm just envisioning the Grug mage setting where you actually
take literate.
that
would be funny.
Aside, imagine in like that Viking era setting, like
if you took literate, it would be like I can read runestones, or your clergy, yeah.
No, I like Grug Mage because this is pre-language. This is pre-written language.
Yeah, like no one really knew how to read it, right? Except a few certain people back with it. But anyway, contracts. They had contract merits in regards to some of the Fae.
Yeah, there is the contract of blades, which is blade stuff. If you want to do a sword mage changeling, here you go.
Mm-hmm. This allows you to do some pretty cool things with swashbuckling.
Yeah,
it essentially lets you draw your weapon as essentially, in D&D terms, a free action.
There's also one that allows you to transform one blade into any other blade.
I like well-honed edge because the butter knife.
Yeah, you can say I've got a butter knife. I'm gonna fuck you up with it.
I'm just envisioning this man murdering a corrupt priest with a butter knife because it just went right through his head.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. And then the 5.1 is actually really fucking good. Admittedly, it costs 3 glamour, but the results of it are that you get to if you have both the weaponry and at least one bladed specialty and a non-combat skill, you gain the appropriate bonus to all bladed weaponry attacks for a number of turns equal to the number of successes made on the activation roll times your weird. So if you are weird 3, you gain 3 times the successes you made. If you're weird 5 or 6, this could be like, I have 15 successes. Get fucked.
No, that's not times. Yeah,
so you're saying that this is the era of the quick draw. The quick draw.
No, I'm reading. It's not times 3. It's just plus.
No, it is. You gain the appropriate bonus to all the blade weaponry attacks for a number of turns equal to the number of successes made on the activation roll times your weird.
Where is that?
Under the success for the level 5 power.
Oh, level 5. Yeah. Okay, for level 5 power, I can see it. You saber.
Yeah, like that is insanely good.
I'm trying to read it, and it doesn't say multiply.
Yeah, okay. Let me tell you.
In combat, the character gains appropriate bonus to. I'm going to read it directly. All blade-based weaponry attacks for the number of turns equal to the number of successes made on the activation roll times her weird.
No, it's only extended rolls.
No, extended rolls is if you gain a bonus equal to the times your weird. That's if it's extended, you gain it for a number of rolls.
Oh, I see.
This is for a number of turns. So that's actually really good.
Yeah, but that's a level 5 power.
No, it's for a number of turns equal to the number of successes times their weird. No, that only is cool for duration reasons, dude.
It is, but it's still really cool.
Sorry, my brain is. So these are tokens.
Yeah, these are just which is basically just the magical little bits for changelings to use.
And then there's a little thing what the other things are doing. The vampires are this is the perfect time for them. They're having a blast.
Yep. The European werewolves are going all over to the New World because they've heard some fantastic things about it. Open hunting grounds all over the place.
Speaking of hunters, the hunters must hunt.
Yep.
But the Mali is just they're recent.
Yeah, they're recent, and they're using this cover of the Protestant persecutions to be able to do whatever the fuck they want right now. It's pretty great for them.
Also, the Inexorables, they actually formed because of the 30 Years' War. They're veterans from that period who dealt with horrible shit.
Yeah.
The mages are kind of doing their own thing. They don't they're taking advantage of all the boost in book learning and printing, but they don't really care about.
Also, the developing court life. The other thing that mages are loving is that developed court life. It allows them to do all sorts of weird little.
Hello, yes, I am the court wizard now. Go fuck yourself. Basically.
Well, I mean, it also allows them to just kind of be ostentatious, put their.
It also probably lets them do things like, yeah, I'm the noble from X era. Hey, would you mind? Do you guys want to invest in You guys want to invest in this cool idea I have?
True.
Yeah.
The Sin Eaters are kind of how they always are.
Yeah, where they're kind of on the edges of society to some degree, but they're also clustering around churches a lot. Because cathedrals often sit over places with underworld connections, which sort of makes some sense, especially in France.
And last but not least, you can run into not a ton, but there's several mummies around.
Well, yeah, someone might have grabbed something in the Crusades 500 years ago. In their own
words, following a modest number of mummies can be found, following the trade routes and investigating a shadowy economy of occult objects. Legends of the Templar gold have never died down, and several nobles boast of trophies their ancestors took from the Crusades.
Who the fuck knows what the demons are doing?
Nobody knows. They don't matter. Then we get a packed group for basically a prestige class for changelings.
The Knights of St. Colin.
And then it's just inspirations, which very simple, very short, very to the point. It is Alexandre Dumas, of course.
I mean, that's probably where most of it is.
Scaramouche as well, the fairy tales of Madame de Aulnoy, which is a classic anthology of folk tales from France, which was written during this time period. Of course, there is the book about the poison affairs, the strange revelations,
which is all the weird stuff.
And the Book of the Courtier, which was essentially essential reading for every noble of the time because Louis liked the book.
Yeah. That's kind of the summary of this. This is a little bit shorter than usual, but again, some of this does feel like just page count. Oh fuck, we needed to get some more page count out here.
A little bit, but we needed to make sure. Well, I don't even think they did because it's a 600-page book.
For this section.
A little bit. I don't know. I mean, the Knight of St. Colin's not a bad idea. I feel like maybe they could have done a little more. It's the
list of skills is more what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
But if nothing else, I'm gonna rate. Since we're at the end, I'm gonna. No, this is the official rating, but essentially, I think one of the term that kind of describes how this book kind of gives it off. It's crap saccharine in the sense that it's got like this saccharine flavor, but it's layered over like a shitty age. I'm not saying like the era is not saying like that it's written badly. I'm saying like it has essentially the nice fluff and flavor, but at the same time you can't hide a piece of shit. Shit.
There's a lot of shitty shit going on. Yeah.
To me, I'm actually gonna just say this is decent.
Yeah, I have to agree.
It's decent. Yeah. Oh yeah. I just rate it decent, but that's what I mean. I mean, it's just like I don't think it really It doesn't really. It kind of talks. Maybe this was us, but yeah, like I think maybe it was just a bit. It just doesn't really. It didn't do enough to sell me on the era.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
The biggest problem is that the major things people would be interested in are just mainly the works of Alexandre Dumas.
Right.
Once you get past the Count of Monte Cristo and Three Musketeers books, there's honestly not as much as you'd think, in a way. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, especially if you like your courtly intrigue dramas. It's just, compared to some of the settings, it's just, a little limited. It might also help that, they didn't have a lot, so they just kind of padded it with a bunch of skill descriptions and merits.
And daily life.
They could have they should have gone a little more into daily life, not just in Paris, but in other of the urbanizing towns. The control methods on the countryside, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think part of it is because they didn't want to get bogged down in the details of early modern life, which
is fair, but at the same time, I think this one has the problem of the Aztec setting, but worse.
Yes, that's definitely the feel I get for it, where it's trying to cover a broad era and a broad amount of things, but it never really focuses too much on anything.
Well,
in particular.
It doesn't give you enough for the setting to really know it well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of clear that the writer for it, no offense to the writer, but I don't think they actually had as much passion or knowledge of this period. What they saw was the Three Musketeers, and that's all they knew.
I think this is one of the Kickstarter stretch goals that was added in, along with, of all things...
I hope it wasn't a stretch goal.
It was, because this is what it feels like, at least.
That's a bit disappointing. Imagine if this is what you
The other one that I know that happened that was a stretch goal that I know for sure was God's Own Country, which is 1950s New Zealand, which we'll get into eventually.
But since we've all given our ratings, the only thing I'll say for the hint is if what we just read was crap saccharine, the next section is pure crap. Not like the section is crap. I'm saying the era that you're living in is crap.
The next one is actually one of my favorite ones, where it's like,
can I give it a rating?
This one.
Yeah,
Demon
this one.
I'm not sure if it's. I know it's certainly a nation, but it also might be.
It's not Demon at all.
Really?
Hey guys, can I
It
get
is
my
not
rating?
Demon.
Dude,
guys,
no, leave, please.
I'm gonna give my rating.
You literally showed up right when we're wrapping up.
You can't just give your rating.
God, your timing. Oh my god.
Goodbye. All right. But yes,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just personally thought it would have been a decent thing because, well, we're not getting any spoilers, but it's an age of trying to hide yourself.
Oh no! It's actually worse.
It is one of my. I think that the next one is one of the strongest sections in this book, in terms of that it really, really, really focuses on a specific era of history in a specific area, and it goes and it nails that feeling.
I'll only say this, since you're kind of curious, Greg, and audience. Up next, Hunter during the witch trials.
Balaam witch trials.
The ones I just thought would be Hunter, Demon, and Mage, probably.
No, it's just Hunter.
No, it's just Hunter. It's very obvious that this was meant to follow the Blossoms, because it's a very similar feel. It's just that this is on the other side of the world.
And it's crap. It's a crappy time to be alive.
It's a crappy time to be an old woman. I'll put it like that.
Your job is to hunt things. How does it feel to be used by people out to get other people's land
and settle social problems and all these other things?
That's also not including the mass paranoia of the fact that the devil's living in the woods.
The devil might be out there.
So there's
also that.
Either that or the brown, either that or the red, either that or the dark
natives.
People.
It's not going to be fun. Anyway, that's sort of our thing. We all think that this is a decent section of the book that we just covered.
It's just kind of weaker compared to the others.
I know. Like, we have not rated any of these below decent, I think.
No. I think only Alexandre matches it, though, in decent.
Yeah, Alexandre, it's more wasted potential. This one, it's more like this is kind of half-baked.
Half-baked, and it's because the source wasn't enough. And I think we can actually end it here.
Yeah. Good night, everyone. This is a bit of a shorter thing, but we're getting back into the swing of it. It's been a while since we've touched Dark Eras, and it's good to be back.
It is great to be back. Up next, we're going to do witch hunting.
Doubting Souls is up next for Dark Eras.
See ya.